Most subjects within the Residential Basics series have to do with structuring various parts of the daily schedule. However, there's another area in which holding structure is key for the successful functioning of a treatment program. Now, the odds are very good that your program uses some form of timeout in response to unacceptable behaviors. There's at least 3 reasons why timeouts are a great tool. First, timeouts help prevent contagion. Contagion is a term that's originally from the field of firefighting and describes how a fire will spread from one tree to the next. This term also describes how behaviors or emotional states spread from one student to the next, and so on. For example, you might have one boy who is throwing rocks, and perhaps where he's doing it, the way he's doing it, is not really a safety issue. However, you will soon have 5 boys throwing rocks, and now a safety issue is highly likely. So, separating a student from the group prevents contagion. Second, timeouts serve as a pattern interrupt. All people have a pattern of escalating dysregulation, be it behavioral, emotional, or cognitive. And removing a student from whatever situation is triggering that upset can interrupt the escalating pattern. The earlier that a staff person intervenes in this pattern of escalation, the more effective it will be. So that's called a pattern interrupt. Third, timeouts increase a student's self-awareness of his or her own mental states, triggers, and the need to use a coping skill to regain baseline functioning. Timeouts do not work well as punishment. They're not adverse enough, frankly, to directly impact behaviors. Plus, punishments in general are an external control intervention, and they really don't contribute to students learning more internal self-control. Yes, a student may change his or her behavior because of punishments, but those behaviors will come back once a student has left the artificial environment of the treatment program. And then, of course, also from an ethical perspective, punishments are inherently highly questionable. So, a code of conduct. A code of conduct is simply a listing, probably turned into a poster, that details what behaviors will result in essentially different versions of timeouts. And there's different ways of structuring such a list. For example, it might be done in terms of a program's values. Perhaps it'll be worded using positive language. However, I recommend that a code of conduct be a clearly written list of don'ts. That clarity is what works best for kids who struggle with regulating their own behaviors. Don't hit or kick. Don't steal. Don't name call. Don't swear, etc. This is the language that kids understand. Now, violations of the Code of Conduct should result in some type of timeout, some type of removal from the group. And I recommend not using warnings. Once a Code of Conduct has been explained to all students, that code is the warning. Other warnings just turn into a game, they invite a control battle, or they imply that timeouts are a bigger deal than they really need to be. Now look, I'm definitely not a proponent of residential counselors acting like mindless authority figures. You've been hired to exercise professional judgment. So yes, there are going to be situations in which it might make sense to make an exception and give a warning. However, in general, I advise that you not give warnings first before requiring a timeout. I recommend that treatment programs use 3 levels of timeouts. The first level of timeouts is very brief. Remember, the focus is on preventing contagion, interrupting patterns of escalation, and increasing self-awareness. that's best achieved through lots of repetition, not through any one timeout being really lengthy. So, super short timeouts are used for relatively small violations of the code of conduct. I like to call those really short timeouts resets. Now, I define a reset as 30 seconds away from other students. It helps if staff have already established where resets will occur, but the key is that the student is not interacting either verbally or visually with other students. I prefer to have students time themselves and return to the group independently. There's little benefit to staff processing these short resets. The student knows that swearing is a violation of the code of conduct, for instance. One-on-one processing can actually give negative attention that increases the frequency of the behavior. So they know why they were required to do a reset and come back and rejoin the group quickly. So once resets have been established, an individualized reset plan can be created for students who need more or less structure. For example, a student can be given a breathing exercise to do for more structure. Or a student can be allowed to simply take 3 deep breaths and not even actually leave the group. The key is any such individualized reset plans should be in writing so that all staff know how they are implemented. The idea is to come up with a reset method that the student can use in all settings, and a lot of times the best plans really involve input from the student coming up with ideas him or herself of how to take a reset, once they've shown they can do it the standardized way. But, if students refuse to take a reset, I recommend the next level of timeouts, which I like to call breaks. So breaks generally 2 to 5 minutes separated from the group. However, the student cannot independently return to the group. Instead, a staff person has to check in with the student first. If the student's not calm, after 2 to 5 minutes, the staff person would extend the break and try to check in another 2 to 5 minutes. Those check-ins should be brief, so as to not, again, unintentionally reinforce the problem behavior through one-on-one attention. So I recommend limiting a break check-in to something like, are you ready to rejoin the group? Or, are you able to take ownership of the behavior that resulted in this break? The exact wording, of course, is going to be different with different ages and service populations, but I trust you get the general idea. And again, students can, and really a lot of times really benefit from having an individualized break plan that adds more structure. But it's really important those plans be in writing so that all staff can be consistent. Can they listen to music to calm down? Do they write in a journal? Is this optional? Is it required? Just make sure all those individualized plans are written down. And if a student cannot successfully utilize a break, or if the problem behavior is more serious, then I recommend that a timeout be significantly longer. Swearing, for instance, could be a 30-second reset, but physical assault should be a longer period of separation. So let's call that longer type of timeout being out of group. Being out of group should last for anywhere from 15 minutes to the rest of the evening, depending on the severity of the behavior. It should be applied consistently, and ways to do that, I'll focus more in other trainings in the tools series. But for the purposes of this training, programs having a clearly stated code of conduct that ties into 3 levels of timeout, brief resets, longer and more structured breaks, and then being out of group for refusals to cooperate with breaks or for more serious behavior problems is what I'm recommending. And in my experience, when residential staff hold to these structures, even for just a few days or weeks, you'll see a significant reduction in the frequency of problem behaviors. So adapt that to your program, and I'd love to hear how it goes. All right, bye-bye.